we talk about the most hard-hitting, awe-inspiring, and biggest miniatures in the whole of Warhammer, we usually think of kits like the Gargantuan Squiggoth, Smaug the Dragon, and of course the array of hulking Forge World Titans, where the smallest one could cost you over £500 and the largest could set you back close to £2,000 depending on your preferred Titan loadout. But if you're willing to spend the money and you have the time to paint them, then you too can be one of the prestigious few to own some of the coolest and most impressive miniatures in the entire hobby. And sure, some people may laugh at you and your expensive chunk of resin at your local hobby shop, but we know better, don't we, Stampy? I love you, Stampy. Here, give me out. That is a very sharp Squiggoth. No hug. No hugging the Squiggoth. Nope. But recently, both me and it seems a lot of you guys too have been getting into a new hobby. A new, big fighting space robot shaped hobby. But if you're a bit of a newbie like I am, then you're probably wondering the same thing as I did, which is, what is Gundam's Warlord Titan? Like, what is the Gunpla kit which is so big and cool and impressive that it makes all Gunpla fans in the world collectively go, hell yeah. Well, it turns out that that kit is the RX-78-2 Perfect Grade Unleashed. That's right, baby. Unleashed. This bad boy currently retails for around £250, and as well as boasting being Gunpla's most perfect kit, it's also one of the biggest, most detailed and flashiest Gunpla models ever made. With a 5-stepped phased build, real metal elements, every accessory a fighting suit could ever need, and it even has a fully functioning LED system which comes with the kit. And of course, I'm here today because I got it! Yay! So in this video, I'm gonna give you guys a full review of this absolutely titanic Gundam kit, from the unboxing experience, the full build, and also my final thoughts on if I think this perfect take on a legendary mobile suit is worth the price, and also all of the hype. Creaky chair. Creaky whoosh. So before we start, I want to put my cards on the table here, because I know I just bigged up how expensive this model kit is, but I ended up paying exactly £0 and 0 pennies for him because I actually won him. Accidentally. Let me explain. A few months ago, Bandai invited me and some other lovely people to a kind of creatory meetup that they were hosting at Comic-Con, and just a little shout out to Bandai UK here, because they're always so nice and they really make me feel welcome at these events, even though I'm kinda new to the hobby. Anyways, whilst we were there, they had a couple of activities lined up for us, such as a demo of their new card game, a chance to display our GBWC entries at Comic-Con, which was awesome, and I absolutely loved that. And finally, a little painting competition. We each got given a tiny Gunpla-kun kit to build and customize in 40 minutes, and I painted mine to look like it was made of wood with all these little green accents to match the kind of eco-pla theme that I was going for. Anyways, time ran out and I was just chatting away and admiring everyone's work, completely unaware that there was any judging going on, but then they called out my name and everyone was like clapping and I was overwhelmed, and it turned out that they had picked my little wooden boy as their winner. So I walked up expecting a handshake and they handed me this, and yeah, thankfully absolutely no footage exists of this moment because I was really sweaty and overwhelmed and a nervous wreck, and I think I possibly cried as well. I don't know, it's all a bit of a blur, so have a dramatic recreation with an Urgling, I guess. But either way, somehow, even though I still consider myself to be somewhat of a Gundam newbie, I now own one of the biggest, most detailed, and most expensive Gundam kits on the market. So I guess let's get right in and start with the first thing you see when you get this kit, the box. As you may have noticed, it's huge and very, very heavy too, and it's so big in fact that the box has this very handy little briefcase handle at the top. And maybe you can already tell through my camera lens, but this looks like a super high quality luxury item already. The box art is amazing on this dark background, and it really looks like a fancy little step up from most of the other Gundam boxes out there that I've seen. Turning the box around gives you a detailed look at some of the exclusive features and gimmicks which sets this kit apart from basically every other kit on the market, including the 5-phase Gunpla Evolution link system, the real metal components, and of course the working LEDs, which are included in this mammoth kit. But more on those in a little bit, because it's time to crack this bad boy open. Finally. As you can probably tell, unboxing this fully on camera was a bit of a nightmare and a little bit tricky due to the sheer whopper of the situation at hand. And as soon as you slide the little box out, you are just hit with the scale of what you're about to undertake. Like, holy mother of Shar, that is a lot of plastic. And this isn't even all of the runners fully laid out, and it's already taking up my entire new studio floor. And when you consider that each of the bags you see here has like 2 to 3 sprues in it, and each of those sprues are pretty damn packed, yeah, you can imagine I was already feeling a little bit overwhelmed here. Once I had calmed down a little bit and put all the sprues back in the box, the next thing I reached for a little bit of guidance was obviously the construction booklet, which as well, surprise, surprise, was huge and absolutely beautifully printed too. In the first couple of pages, it gives you a detailed rundown of the kit, its features, and what to look out for as you're building it. Specifically, this phased build Gunpla Evolution link system. But Louise, what is a phased build Gunpla Evolution link system? Well, I don't know. Sounds cool though. It's kind of hard to explain, but it turns out that instead of just getting the job done as fast as possible, with this kit you build it in specific phases, which seem to kind of guide you through how each layer of this mobile suit would work in real life. In phase 1 and 2, you build up the suit's skeletal frame with all of its intricate and articulated moving parts. In phase 3, you add in the metallic truss frame, which will be visible underneath the armor. In phase 4, you start to build up all of the external armor, you add in some decals and stickers, and you make it look like what we'd recognize as the RX-78 suit. Then phase 5 is simply called effects, and I'm calling this phase the play with your toy phase because it kind of just encourages you to pose your model and enjoy the biggest number of opening hatches in the history of Gunpla. Good lord. And then after that, the rest of the 65 pages are all construction booklet, baby. But fortunately, I'm a gal who just really loves building miniatures. So let's start at the very beginning with phase 1. Gonna lie, starting this kit was a little bit intimidating, but also really exciting too. And from the get-go, there were already a couple of things which were blowing my mind that became obvious in this very first phase. Firstly, the construction booklet and the sprues themselves absolutely slap, and weirdly they kind of work together to make this kind of scary task as easy as it can possibly be. Before you start building any part of the model, the construction booklet lays out which sprues you're going to need at the beginning of each section, telling you not only the number of the sprue, but also the color and even what section of the sprue you're going to need to assemble this bit. But my favorite part, and again this is going to be quite hard to describe, but the parts on the sprue are almost laid out how they would go onto the miniature. The parts for the left arm are on the left, the torso parts are in the middle, and so on. But if this wasn't enough, there's also little illustrations on the sprue to help you work out which parts belong where if you get a little bit lost. Like, look at how cute this little picture of a torso is for the torso area. That's amazing. Anyways, back to the build itself. And I think because I've been building Gunpla for nearly a year now, I already kind of take some cool stuff for granted. Like the fact fact that everything here is push fit and the push fit just works, and there is absolutely zero glue needed in this entire kit. But in the first phase, there were a bunch of these cut it off the sprue and it's a fully working and moving part pieces, and they never cease to amaze me. And even though it was just phase 1, I was already blown away by all of the moving parts. All of the details like the working pistons in the ankles and wrists, the sculpted details on the plastic, plus all of these gorgeous shiny metallic parts really made this guy feel like a real shrunken down mobile suit. And to my surprise, it was all actually relatively easy to build as well. Like, sure, it's pretty complex and I guess part heavy, but not necessarily difficult. Just a little bit time consuming, but in a super fun, meditative way. And speaking of which, by the time I'd finished the basic skeleton, I realized that I had kind of built phases 1 and 2 at the same time, but looking back at the instructions, there's not a huge difference between them, so I'm not mad about my little wombo combo approach here. And here's how the model looks after you've completed phases 1 and 2, and already you can tell it looks absolutely amazing and so detailed and articulated, but here's the catch. This alone took me 2 days to build, and I don't mean like 2 days just doing a couple of hours in my spare time. No, I mean this took me like 2 full working days to build. Whenever I'm cutting a piece off the sprue, I'm spending an extra 1 minute at least removing all of the nub marks as best I can by carefully using a very sharp craft knife and some glass files to make each piece absolutely perfect. And I guess maybe that's like a little bit extra, but I really want to take my time here and make this kit look as good as I can when it's done, because it's worth it and it's expensive as fuck. So with phases 1 and 2 complete, it's time to move on to our building day 3 and also phase 3 of the model. Not to jump the gun too much, but this phase ended up being maybe my favorite phase of all, partially because it was super quick and easy. Phase 3 is just adding these big detailed metallic truss frames to the already existing skeleton in order to kind of dress it up a little bit and make it look more cool and detailed and stuff, but yeah, it was not difficult or slow at all. In fact, this phase only took up around 4 pages of the book, and I managed to get it done in only a couple of hours, and I think the results after you finish this phase is one of the coolest things about this entire build. What you get after finishing phase 3 is the most detailed looking mech suit skeleton I have ever seen. This was such a rewarding step, and it just had so much depth and detail and articulation, and as you can see, I just ended up fawning over this part of the build for a very long time because I kind of didn't want to cover it up with the armor. I felt a little bit sad that I'd be moving on to the next step, and a part of me wanted to leave it like this, or maybe do some sort of like half and half split down the middle thing, because it just looked so cool all stripped down to its core like this. But alas, it was time to say goodbye to my sweet naked robot man and get ready for day 4 and phase 4. Phase 4 is basically the draw the rest of the owl part of the entire build, because in this step you're doing everything else you need to do to make this suit look more like what we'd recognize as the RX-78 mobile suit. And this sounds easy, right? There's not much left to do, just pop on some armor panels and decals and most of the model is done anyway, right? Well, not exactly. This is where I actually started to really slow down and concentrate, because I knew that in this phase especially, the quality of the build was about to show big time. And I'm really glad that I ended up spending a bit more time here, because trust me, this phase is pretty awesome. Here, even more so than in stage 1 and 2, you realize that basically everything is a little peekaboo window. Like, all those moving parts before have little moving doors and windows to go with them, so that even though you're covering up the mecha skeleton, you still get to open up hatches all over the body to have a little peep at some of the coolest parts parts that you assembled. The color separation as well in this stage is fantastic. Remember that during this build, other than using a pen to touch up a little nub mark here and there, I'm not touching any paints or brushes at all. There's two subtly different tones of white and red and even yellow on this guy, which helps make this very bright and primary colored scheme look a lot more intricate and detailed. And after about 5 hours of sanding and fitting, he was fully armored up and finally looking like the RX-78 Gundam. But just when you thought you were done and you were finally on the home stretch with your 1000 empty sprue pile, you look over at your leftover sprues and somehow there's still like 12 left. Oh my god, when does it end? Well, it turns out that because obviously this guy is the fanciest little weapon of destruction in town, that he has a bunch of accessories. And yeah, I still had like another 4 or 5 things left to build. So let's go. The first thing I built were the beam sabers, which I chose to do first because they were super duper easy, and then I moved on to his beam rifle as well, which surprisingly had like 100 moving parts to it too, including the little trigger, which was just awesome. The shield, in my opinion, is one of the most visually impressive accessories in the whole kit, just due to the absolute scale of the parts that you are cutting out and putting together. And again, there is just an unnecessary amount of little gadgets and doohickeys attached to this piece. And my favorite bit is the little window shutter here, which goes up and down. It's just so extra. But I think the best accessory that's included in this kit has to be the little core fighter plane, because it's essentially like a mini Gundam kit in of itself. So this entire fighter plane that I'm building here can replace the little core block, which we already built back in phase 1 and 2. And as I was building it, I didn't really understand how. Like, this plane seemed pretty big and elaborate with its pull-out cockpit and relatively large wingspan. I was thinking, do I have to remove the wings and the tail fin in order to fit it in the body or something like that? Because that's no fun. And then I finished it and I looked at the instructions, and to my shock, the whole thing just folds up into itself to make a core block, which you can pop right into the mobile suit's body. And I know you guys are probably going to be sick of hearing this at this point, but the engineering, once again, has blown my mind. But now that I finished the main mobile suit and all of his accessories, it's time to move on to making this guy seem a little bit more intricate and detailed using stickers. Now, I'm really skeptical about the use of stickers. I've built a few Gundam kits with stickers in it before, and I usually opt to just paint it instead of using them. So I was surprised that this very expensive kit came with stickers instead of something like water slide decals. And part of me kind of thought that maybe I would just leave him like this and not use any stickers at all, but I'd spent this long on him and I wanted him to look complete, and all of the motifs on the artwork really did make him look cool, so I grabbed my tweezers and I decided to give the stickers my best shot. I started, as the instructions guided me, with the 3D metallic effect stickers, and they were honestly so nice, and they just fell into place. They were thick and durable, and they felt more like sturdy plastic parts than actual stickers. And when you're done putting them in, they catch the light so nicely, and they already make this kit look a lot more pricey. And when it came to the other non-3D effect stickers, again, I'm pleased to say that I was actually really pleasantly surprised. These stickers are super high quality, and it turns out they're really easy to apply too. And when they're on, it really doesn't look like there's stickers on there at all, especially on the white and grey areas. On the darker parts, like the blue-black back piece and the red parts where it's a little bit more detailed, you can kind of tell a little bit more that there's stickers on there, and things can look a little bit messy on closer inspection, but even here on the red shield, I'd say that the sticker looks pretty great. And when I was done with all of them and I had carefully placed every single one in its exact correct position, I was super glad I stuck it out and gave them a go, because the end effect does look amazing. The final step, and maybe the one that you've all been waiting for, is to finally put the LEDs in this suit. And a lot of people have asked me this already, so I just want to say that yes, this kit does come with its own LEDs. But when I opened up the packet of LED materials to start building, I realized that for the body at least, batteries are not included, so I had to hop online and order some and wait a few days for them to arrive. Anyways, the beam saber does, however, come with a battery and was extremely easy to install. The kit comes with a secret third saber hilt, which looks exactly like the other ones, except it's got a little LED inside. You unscrew the bottom, put the battery in, put the bottom back on, turn it on with this tiny little switch on the side, and bam! You have a fairly impressive lighting effect. The battery, which is included with the beam saber, does say that it's a test battery, so I have the feeling that it won't last very long and that maybe it could be brighter with a better battery, but for now, I'm super happy with this result. I had heard, however, from a few other people who have built this kit that apparently the LED system inside of the body is a bit of a nightmare to install. The main component to light up the eyes and the chest area is this tiny little unit here, which I found quite surprising given those two areas are pretty far apart from each other. And once your batteries are in and you've tested the lights, you pop off your guy's head and then you place the lighting component into his chest cavity. In order to activate the light sequences, you have to pull out the chest hatch and then push it back in very specifically under 1 second. Anything more than just 1 second and the light sequence turns off, which means you have to be pretty accurate and a little bit forceful to get the lights to work. But once I'd worked it out, it honestly wasn't that bad at all. I just feel like it could have been designed somehow a little bit easier. But despite the kind of clunky switch mechanism, the effect that the LEDs have, I think, are well worth the effort. Cause just have a look at those freaky, spooky, glowy effects. They look so good, and the whole thing just kind of elevates the kit to the next level. And speaking of which, with the LEDs now thoroughly in place and after a full week of building every single day, this bad boy is officially complete. So let's take a look at the finished model and talk about some of my final thoughts on the project as a whole using a few rating system categories which I've made up just for this video. The first thing I'm going to rate this kit on is how easy it was to build, but also how much fun I had building it too. And for both those categories, I'm going to give this guy a solid 9 out of 10. I had an amazing time building this perfect grade Unleashed kit. And yeah, with all of its stages and details, it was an extremely enjoyable journey too. And like I said before, it was phenomenally easy as well, given the absolute scale of the project. The instructions were clear and the pieces all went together, and honestly, I've built more frustrating Lego kits in my life. I'm deducting just 1 point here because of the sheer amount of time you have to commit in order to complete this project. Like I said, this whole project took me a solid week to finish. So whilst it was technically a relatively easy build, it is a very big task to undertake, especially if you're a stickler for details and finish quality like I am. So I'm not sure I'd exactly call it the most beginner-friendly build in the world, but would I recommend it to anyone who enjoys building model kits? Yes, I would. It's amazing. Next up, let's talk about one of the most important parts of any Gunpla kit, and that is its posability and durability. And I'm going to be giving this guy an 8 out of 10 in this category. As we saw during the build phase, this dude is packed with joint sockets and a ton of moving parts, so it's absolutely no surprise that he is also extremely posable. And even when fully armored, he moves absolutely beautifully. The joints are nice and firm and kind of stiff, but in a good way because he is a weighty little beefcake and his firmer joints are perfect for holding up his body weight and those heavier poses. But just a quick heads up, if you are planning on getting this kit yourself, the top half is very heavy, as you can imagine, and the waist joint isn't super secure. I don't know if I'm just doing something wrong or if it's supposed to be like this, but the waist doesn't exactly clip into place on the hip section and it can just drop off quite easily easily because of gravity. So I really recommend just separating him into two parts, posing him up first, and then putting him together upright. And I just recommend also being a little bit more careful than usual when you're moving him around and posing him and stuff like that, because I don't like the chances of that V-fin on his head surviving a very heavy drop from desk height. But that being said, once you get used to handling him, this whole thing is a total blast. And I'm pleased to say that unlike some other kits that I've built, he stayed impressively in one piece whilst I was posing him, with only one little bit falling off his arm whilst I was being a little bit too rough posing him, which is totally my bad. To my surprise, there aren't any posable fingery hand options with this kit, but you do get a great variety of hand options as a kind of trade-off, with open hands, closed fists, and weapon holding options too. So I didn't really feel like there was any pose beyond a couple of rude gestures that I was missing out on. And after a whole lot of fun and playing around with different positions, I eventually settled on my final kind of display pose that I wanted to keep, which is this menacing dual weapon shield on back pose, because it looks really spooky and menacing. Nice. And speaking of which, our next rating category is aura and aesthetics, which is basically how cool does the kit look? And he is absolutely getting a 10 out of 10 in this category, obviously. I mean, just look at him. He looks absolutely like the coolest thing I have ever seen in my life. I think the sheer size of this model meant that the designers could really go ham with kind of laying out the proportions of the RX-78 suit as they should be, and honestly, it makes him look really scary, as he should be. My personal favorite kind of representation of the RX-78 suits and Gundam suits in general is definitely the White Devil sort of spin, with them being these freaky, powerful, psychically attuned killing machines lurking in the darkness of space. And this kit gives me that big menacing vibe more than any other I've ever seen. But that aside, the kit itself as well is just so cool to look at, and each piece is incredibly detailed, and the scale of all the details too just makes this guy feel even bigger. I think if I spent another couple of days panel lining him, he would look even better, but honestly, I don't really feel like I need to. And right out the box, this guy really is the absolutely terrifying jewel in my entire Gundam collection. Finally, we're gonna rate what I'm gonna call the extra bits, which are essentially, I guess, just the features and gimmicks on this kit, which makes it stand out from other model kits. And for this, again, he is getting a very high rating of 9 out of 10. If the RX-78 is your favorite suit, or you just like cool Gundam kits in general, then this guy has everything you could ever dream of, with an incredibly detailed inner frame, uncountable moving parts and little windows, the ultimate little fighter plane inner core, and of course the insanely engineered weapon loadout. The weapons in particular are awesome, and the gun, shield, and core fighter especially felt like little miniature kits in themselves, which was just awesome. But I do wish there was just one more LED beam saber option so that he could dual wield them, but I guess I'm just being selfish and a little bit greedy as well, because let's face it, I'm just grateful to have one. I love that this kit included them as well, and it definitely gives the whole thing an extra little something that makes it feel more worth the 250 plus price tag. But of course, let's remember that I didn't pay anything for this guy, so take from that what you will. But I guess in conclusion, as a longtime Warhammer fan and as someone who has only relatively recently gotten into Gundam and Gunpla, I have to say that this entire experience absolutely blew my mind. It's actually been such an incredible trip and experience, and the end results are so amazing that I've sort of struggled to make this video and to put all my thoughts into words. So I hope that seeing this whole experience from start to finish has kind of helped you guys see what I saw, which is that this absolutely slapped. So even if you're new to the hobby, then I do highly recommend that you pick this kit up, especially if you are a big fan of incredible looking model kits. But if you do pick them up, just make sure you give yourself a couple of days to let your fingers recover from pushing together that much plastic. Oh yeah, and make sure you have a display shelf big enough to fit him. Whoops. But I'm afraid that is all we have time for today. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. And as always, thank you for being rogues. I will see you in the next one. Bye. Bye-bye.